At long last, Prince Harry has finally had his HRH title stripped from the royal family website. Buckingham Palace has ditched his title online 3 years after it was agreed that he would lose it following the Megxit deal. It took nearly as long as...
Harry and Meghan, are they next?
I think so. I think you should watch this space, continue to watch this space, because the king has shown us within the last 24 hours how easy it can be. And
Parliament moving to strip royal titles sounds like a thunderclap. Headlines make it feel done and dusted. But here's the uncomfortable truth. In the UK, titles don't evaporate because a tweet went viral. To take a dukedom off the board, you need law. Either Parliament passes a new act or gives the monarch new legal teeth to do it. That's why tonight matters. Westminster has dragged the titles question back into the spotlight, and it's not just about family drama anymore, it's about the rules of the crown itself. And if rules change, the consequences aren't just symbolic. They hit status, contracts, billing, and every project that leans on the word Duchess. That's why every whisper out of the Commons gets treated like a siren. The mood shift is real.
The monarchy, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, those two hucksters over in Montecito, they have to go next because they've been dining out on their titles for the last 6 years, and they left the royal family 6 years ago.
well, I think that the royal family said enough.
For years, the refrain was, let it blow over. Interviews, a docuseries, a memoir, a podcast. Every cycle brought outrage, then silence. That playbook is wearing thin. When political oxygen hits a royal topic, the tone changes. The family can ignore a headline. Parliament can write a bill, and that's the difference between noise and law.
And then also with Harry and Meghan will determine the future of his reign.
Of the distractions, the headlines were getting increasingly worse, and
can MPs really pull the Sussex titles? Short answer, they can, if they legislate. The UK system is allergic to magic wands. There's precedent for Parliament stepping in on dignities, and while the well-known historical examples come from wartime and very specific contexts, they prove a simple point. If the state decides a title undermines the institution that granted it, the state can take it away.
it's easy.
Yes, indeed, and not with an Act of Parliament, because the
Correct.
assumption, Peter Cardwell, is an Act of Parliament would be required, a letters patent, but it's all being done through the Lord Chancellor's office, and therefore you don't have the spectre of parliamentary time debating who should be king, who should be prince.
That doesn't mean it's easy. It means it's possible, and possibility changes behavior. The minute the Commons puts pen to paper, even as a draft, the conversation shifts from should to how soon. There's also the time factor. Bills don't pass overnight.
What has done, I think, is actually pulled the rug from under Andrew and indeed the parliamentary establishment as well. So it's now David Lammy, the Lord Chancellor, who's going to have an important role in this.
7 and 10 or something of 10 rules. Well, you're 3 strikes, you're out. Just use a baseball analogy there. 3 strikes, you are out. And that's how it should be done. This is a great move. I don't think it totally goes far enough, but I think the royal family is...
First reading is a formality. Second reading is where the political fight shows its face. Committee stage is where definitions get sharpened like knives. What counts as bringing the crown into disrepute? Who triggers a review? Is there an appeal? The Lords will ask those questions line by line. And while that grinds on, the market reacts. Agents, sponsors, producers, event organizers. Even if not a single clause becomes law, the fear that it might is enough to move money. When Harry and Meghan stepped back in 2020, the palace signaled a boundary. No HRH styling while not serving as working royals. Clean in principle, messy in practice. Over time, the royal website got pruned and polished, sometimes late, sometimes under pressure. Profile pages moved, language shifted, archived references got corrected. It looked like housekeeping. It felt like a slow negotiation with the past. And every time a line changed, the same question resurfaced. If you won't call them HRH in public-facing spaces, how long before someone asks whether the dukedom itself still tracks with public expectations of duty? Meanwhile, Westminster did what Westminster does. Backbenchers floated proposals to fix the ambiguity, give the monarch explicit statutory authority to remove titles, not just withdraw patronages or click edit on a website. Some drafts put the monarch in the driver's seat, advised by a joint committee with a transparent process to recommend removal. Others suggested stricter automatic criteria. If a person is not a working royal or brings the crown into disrepute as defined by statute, then a removal process kicks in. You can debate the definitions, you can debate the optics, but once a mechanism exists, the debate moves from feelings to filings. And that's crucial. The palace prefers unwritten understandings. Parliament prefers systems. Unwritten rules are good at smoothing family tension. Systems are good at answering the angry question from the public. Why do they get to keep it? The gap between those two instincts is the crack the whole titles argument keeps leaking through. Like it or not, the modern conversation about titles starts with the Andrew crisis. Parliament didn't just fume, it experimented. Motions were tabled, pressure applied, patronages stripped, and a path cleared for retreat from public life. But the dukedom stayed intact, and that created a precedent with teeth and a shadow with a long reach. If someone accused of appalling behavior can still legally be a duke, what exactly does a title mean? The public heard one answer, politicians heard another. Every time the Sussexes did anything remotely connected to brand royal, critics held up that mirror. Two different scandals, one unresolved standard. And that standard matters for Harry and Meghan. Not because their situation is identical, it isn't, but because Parliament hates inconsistency. If the system can't explain why one title remains and another endures while both generate relentless reputational drag, pressure builds for a rule that applies to everyone. Legally tidy, politically defensible, publicly legible. In other words, a mechanism that outlives the personalities. The palace moves slow for a reason. Titles are not just names. They're tools of state storytelling. Rip one away without a universally accepted process, and you trigger a bigger argument. Is the crown punishing dissent? Is it policing image? Is it bowing to a tabloid cycle? That's why monarchs prefer soft power, patronage withdrawals, diary silence, dignified distance. But Parliament answers to voters. Soft power doesn't satisfy a constituency that sees the brand value of the crown traded on a California carpet. So the Commons reaches for hard edges. Definitions, tests, procedures. And then there's the global gaze. A move against the most high-profile mixed-race duchess in history would ignite international scrutiny. The palace knows it. MPs know it. The US press knows it. That's the powder keg. Craft the criteria too narrowly, and it looks personal. Craft them too broadly, and you risk unintended targets. Threading that needle is why committees exist, and why the clock always seems to run long. Whether you admire him or not, the reporting points to a simple characterization. William wants a crown that feels less like a celebrity franchise and more like a constitutional instrument. Fewer titles orbiting the brand. Cleaner lines between serves the institution and sells the proximity. That's not law. It's a philosophy. But philosophies become law when politics line up. If a comprehensive removal and review framework ever lands, the logic will be William adjacent. Tidy, restrained, rules first. A system that can defend its choices in front of a hostile committee and an even more hostile internet. And that is a very different strategy from silence. Silence manages a moment. Systems manage a decade. If the monarchy is being re-engineered for the long haul, expect the quieter blueprint to become visible in how Parliament writes powers and how the palace declines to exercise them until it does. Let's be practical. The day after a legal change, every label that leans on Duke or Duchess of Sussex needs rewriting. Introductions at conferences, lower thirds on broadcast panels, speaker bios at corporate retreats. The pre-roll that says with the Duchess of Sussex becomes with Meghan Markle. That's not a matter of taste. It's contractual. Talent agreements that reference titles get amended or replaced. Promotional assets get re-exported. Event signage is reprinted. The costs are minor for any one gig, but multiplied across a year of bookings, they stack. Then comes the valuation effect. Royal adjacency is a multiplier. It says this isn't just fame, it's institutional aura. Remove the aura, reprice the expectation. Sponsors are not sentimental, they're cautious. A title that survives controversy tells sponsors the brand is protected by inertia. A title that can be stripped tells sponsors the calculus is volatile. Volatility discounts price. Media strategy also takes a hit. Even when you don't say the title out loud, search engines hear it. Query volumes for Duchess of Sussex podcast, Duchess of Sussex speech, Duchess of Sussex Foundation drag traffic across a content ecosystem. If that string stops being truthful, content managers retag posts, adjust metadata, rebuild pillar pages, and watch a tail of organic clicks taper. That's not drama. It's mathematics. There's a booking dynamic too. Charity galas and think tank salons love a title. It signals gravitas, continuity, diplomacy. Lose the title and you're back to a different market, still bookable, still bankable, but framed as celebrity excellence rather than constitutional prestige. That switch matters most in rooms where legacy donors write checks because they felt near statecraft for 90 minutes. Without the imprimatur, those bookings don't vanish. They just need a new story to justify the price. And on the content side, the angle shifts. A Netflix pitch that once leaned on royal lensing must lean on impact lensing. This isn't a royal story, it's a global story with a particular couple at the center. That's a viable arc. It's just a heavier lift. Platforms will buy it if the material sings. But they'll pay less for the implied halo and more for the pages of proof. Now, the nuance almost nobody gets right in a comment section. A peerage is a legal dignity. HRH and prince/princess are styles governed by instruments like letters patent. Historically, sovereigns tweak styles to reflect modern needs. Who counts? Who doesn't? Who bears which honorifics? That's not the same as yanking a modern dukedom. And that's why lawyers and legislators keep talking past each other. One tool is a scalpel, the other is a bone saw. So what happens to Archie and Lilibet if the climate hardens? It depends entirely on the shape of a new instrument or statute. A sovereign could issue tighter guidance on styles going forward. Who gets what within the working core of the family? Parliament could draft a general removal framework for peerages tied to public service criteria, or both could happen in sequence. A style clarification first, legislative teeth after. But every scenario runs into the same political tripwire. Fairness. If the rules look tailor-made for two kids, it will blow up. If they're framed as a future-facing standard that quietly applies to everyone, they might land. And precedent loves clarity. The system functions best when parents can tell their children where they'll stand in 30 years. If titles turn into a partisan football, the monarchical brand bleeds stability. If titles are governed by a clean if-then rule, serve, keep, don't serve, don't trade, the logic might survive even ugly news cycles. What should you watch? 3 signals, each louder than a headline. First, text. When a real bill appears, it has clauses, not vibes. It defines terms like removal, review, and recommendation. It names a committee or creates one. It sets evidentiary thresholds. If you don't see those words, you're not looking at law, you're looking at pressure. Second, time. If the government allocates time, the bill is live ammunition. If it's backbench only, it's a message rocket. Both matter. Only one changes the world. Third, scrutiny. Committee stage is where title's fate gets welded to phrases. If the bill survives with tight language and clear safeguards, it will be very hard to challenge later. If it leaks imprecision, the lords will punch holes in it, and the story repeats next session. And that's the real drama. The next move won't be a surprise tweet or a palace memo. It'll be a PDF on a parliament server, a first reading date, and a line in an order paper. When that drops, the countdown begins, not to the end of a family, but to the start of a rulebook. Why this fight won't stay quiet. For 6 years, the monarchy's strategy was patience. It weathered interviews, it weathered ratings spikes and poll dips, it weathered the biggest royal blowback in modern memory, and still produced a coronation that impressed the world. But patience has a cost. When you decline to decide, someone else decides for you. Parliament hates vacuums, and a vacuum formed around titles, legally simple to state, constitutionally complex to change, emotionally radioactive to touch. That's exactly the kind of problem legislators love to solve with a neat mechanism and a neutral tone. Yet the palace knows something politicians sometimes forget. You can win the rule and lose the narrative. A statute that looks cold will be painted as revenge. A statute that looks soft will be mocked as performative. The prize is a rule that feels like a principle. Titles are for those who represent, not those who monetize. Apply it across the board, forward and back, and it might stand. The brand math nobody says quietly. Inside agencies and boardrooms, they're not debating feelings. They're modeling 2 scenarios. In the status quo world, the Sussex brand keeps its royal gravity, maybe not HRH, but the Duchess label that keeps doors open. In the removal world, the brand pivots to celebrity with a cause. The first world rewards nameplate elegance and royal-adjacent language. The second rewards documentary receipts, policy partnerships, and impact dashboards. And Meghan understands that game. She knows that when the title fades, the work must speak louder. The messaging shifts from a modern duchess to a modern leader. That's still compelling if the projects have spine, but it requires different proof points and different allies. You go from red carpet plus crown aura to bylines, case studies, and measurable wins. Harder, not impossible, where William's philosophy becomes a system. The slim monarchy idea isn't just a staffing chart. It's a discipline. Fewer working royals means fewer gray zones. Fewer gray zones means fewer people trading on proximity. The system can afford a dozen cousins waving on balconies when everyone's aligned. It cannot afford a dozen freelance brands permanently attached to the crest. If the law evolves, it will likely reflect that logic. Dignities flow from duty. If you stop doing the duty, you stop carrying the dignity in public life. Not punitive, just consistent. What about the optics bomb? Everyone sees it. Any move that lands hardest on the most visible woman of color to marry into the family will be framed as cultural punishment. There's no clever spin that erases that risk. The only counter is universality. If a framework applies to Andrew and any other peer who steps out of duty's lane, and if it applies forward to future generations in the same way, the optics begin to look like neutral governance rather than targeted retribution. That's the only path through the minefield. Rules that don't know names. The palace's quiet calculation. The quiet calculation is brutal. Do nothing and watch respect leak. Move rashly and watch legitimacy burn. The sweet spot is a solution that Parliament owns, the palace applies sparingly, and the public understands. If that solution arrives, it won't look like a thunderbolt. It'll look boring. Definitions, committees, safeguards, and boring is exactly what the crown needs right now. The Sussex endgame, with or without titles. Here's the truth that survives every rumor. Harry and Meghan are not going to vanish. Even title-free, their reach is real. They can build credible platforms, fund projects, tell stories that travel. But some of the monetization scaffolding disappears. Without the Duchess brand on the tin, that means more substance, fewer shortcuts, and a narrative that earns its authority in rooms that measure outcomes, not honorifics. And if they go that route, some of their fiercest critics will lose ammunition. You can't say someone is trading on a crown they don't carry. The family endgame, with or without a bill. And the royal family, it either relearns its gift for quiet consistency or keeps dancing in the algorithm. A system beat by social media will always look slow, but the crown's long game was never velocity. It was predictability. If Parliament hands it a rulebook that restores predictable dignity, this saga will finally cool. The internet loves a royal earthquake. But in Britain, earthquakes happen on paper. If Parliament truly moves, you'll see it. Black and white text, a bill number, a timetable, and names attached. Until then, treat every "they're finished" headline as a weather report, not a judgment. The moment a real bill appears, everything changes. Brands pivot, contracts shift, and the House of Windsor proves that titles flow from service, not from streaming deals. When the law moves, the market follows. And that's the only move that sticks. And here's the cliffhanger worth watching. If the next session opens with a clean, neutral, general titles framework, one that neither names nor spares anyone by design, the room will go quiet. Because for the first time in years, the question won't be who wins the headline. It'll be who meets the standard. And that is a very different story to tell.